Hey YouTube, I hope everyone is as safe and healthy as you can be right now, and that you are taking care of yourself and others to the extent that you can. This is going to be the first video in a series that I wanted to do around COVID-19 through tarot and astrology. I was just thinking that I keep having various kind of thoughts about the astrology of the moment, about how tarot can apply right now, and I thought some folks might find this interesting or healing in some ways, and so it's not going to be at any particular frequency, but I'm just going to put these videos out when I have some thoughts that I want to share with y'all. So today, the thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is Aries and the Aries season that we're coming to the end of actually right now, but and it's kind of a very different kind of Aries season. So I think actually if you're interested in thinking more through Aries and how it might look differently right now, another resource I would recommend is the Lindsay Mack's Tarot for the Wild Soul podcast. I believe it's the April monthly medicine. I hope I'm getting that right, but I believe it's that episode where she talks a little bit about the nature of Aries and aspects of it that you might not have thought of, and kind of like birth and initiation, and how initiation doesn't necessarily have to be active in the way of like you're controlling it or you're like starting the spark yourself. It can sort of happen to you, happen around you. I was thinking about this. I'm here in my new apartment in the Seattle area, and pardon the background is not great right here. I'm kind of experimenting with different places in terms of the light, but also haven't got art up or anything, so there's not really a like ideal background yet. So you're just gonna see random bits of a very beige apartment. If you have any recommendations for what goes well with this color, please tell me, because I cannot. But outside my apartment, there is a really nice view. I've actually put some pictures, I think, up on my Instagram at Avery Fawcett if you're curious. But there is a tree that is just outside. Like if I'm in my bedroom, I can see it really clearly just outside the window, or if I'm on the balcony here. And when I moved in, at the start, well, no, actually, I moved to Seattle at the start of Aries season. I moved into my apartment at the start of April, but when I moved in, the first couple of days, the tree was completely bare, and then these little buds started to form, and they turned into leaves. And I'd never really paid any attention, to be honest, to that process in a plant before, but just, I guess, because of the pace of things, because I'm sort of here, not leaving, and because it's a new place, and admittedly also in part because my window blinds in my bedroom are stuck halfway down, I kept noticing that tree and thinking about noticing things like that and the pace of natural processes, natural cycles, like trees in the spring bearing fruit or bearing leaves, I don't know, creating leaves. It's a relatively dependable process. Obviously things can happen to trees, but generally speaking, it's fairly predictable. And it's a different kind of thinking of Aries season as like the time when, in at least my part of the world, in the northern hemisphere, the time when things start to burst open and birth. It's a different kind of energy than what I would immediately associate with the fire element. So if you're not familiar with astrology, Aries is the beginning of the zodiacal wheel. It is about sort of initiation, birth, the initial spark, the like starting things, not necessarily finishing them, but that initial surge of energy. And I have found that I don't relate very well necessarily to fire or in tarot to the wands, because of my very complicated feelings about energy and motivation. And I'll probably talk more about, I talk some about this on the channel. I'll probably do another video at some point, talking more about what I've been exploring with the fire element more generally, and some of the work I've been doing in tarot around healing my relationship to that element, and my relationship to the kind of like spark of Ace of Wands of Aries. But particularly, what was interesting to me, I did a poll about so I mentioned that I moved right at the beginning of Aries season. So I've been thinking a lot about this transition from Pisces to Aries, and Pisces is the end of the zodiacal wheel, Aries is the beginning. So it's this kind of, my whole life, I mean, right now it's been a really major transition, moving across the country, changing the way I am in certain relationships, like really taking advantage of this moment of my life, my 35th birthday. And it has been this, like, endings and beginnings has been a huge theme. I think it has been for a lot of us. We're starting, this is Aries season is associated with the Emperor. We're in an Emperor year. So there's just a lot of that energy, but it's probably manifesting in a different way than a lot of us expected because of COVID. The idea of like the Emperor archetype and COVID might not like make a lot of sense to a lot of people. But I found it super interesting for me because this like Aries energy is not something that I'm naturally comfortable with. I was doing did a tarot, pulled a few cards related to how my kind of like wound around fire and wands, and a question I asked that I thought the card was really interesting was I asked how fire shows up for me differently than it does for others. And the card I got was a card that in the Next World Tarot it's called Suspend, but it's the Hanged card, reversed. And so I thought about that. I was like, okay, Hanged reversed. So it's about when that card comes up reversed. For me, sometimes it's more like you're being impatient and you need to like sit into that energy more. But the way I read it in this context was that fire for me is about that like unfurling and coming out of the cocoon, like when you're ready, when you've been in hanged or suspend energy long enough and you're ready to emerge, you're ready to unfurl, you're ready to kind of open up from your cocoon. That was really interesting to me, and in particular, like, so in my chart, I have my sun in Pisces, and I have my I also have, not that it's relevant to this, but I have my Mercury as well in Pisces, and then I have my Mars and Venus in Aries. And so if you know the way that the zodiacal wheel works, and it may be reversed of how you're seeing it, how I'm doing it, it may flip, but Pisces, then Aries comes. And so my sun, a part that is like really core to me being in Pisces, so Pisces is associated with the moon, but I just like suddenly second guessed that. Is that right? I'm pretty sure Pisces is associated with the moon. I'm like, moon card, astrological association, because now I'm suddenly second guessing myself. Yeah, that's like that. Yeah, so Pisces is associated with the moon, but also Pisces is a kind of Neptunian energy. So if we think about Pisces and Neptune. Neptune is associated with the hang, if you want to call it that. So there's this like feeling that okay, part of me, the sun part, that has at least some relationship to that hanged or suspend energy. And then if you tick one over on the zodiacal wheel, you have, in particular, I'm thinking about my Mars being in Aries, and Mars is a planet of drive and your drive, your like ambition. It can be aggression, but you know, Mars in Aries is very like go go go. Mars is very comfortable in Aries, and so it was like, it's interesting to think about that like flow from one to the other, how the unfurling, the opening up, that my fire or my drive or what have you is strong, but that it is, when I asked how it was different from others, I got that coming out of the suspend. And so it makes me think of like coming out of Pisces, the way that I have astrological associations in those two signs might mean that my Mars and Aries could act a little differently because of the way the sun is predominant right before it. So it's like emphasizing that Pisces, it's emphasizing the experience that comes before the drive and the experience of hanging in discomfort and being still. And like stillness is very important to my fire. So when I'm thinking about myself, and I realize this is like getting very personal, but it was just an example of how you can maybe think about Aries in a different way. So this is personal to my chart, but maybe it can extend a little more broadly, is if you think about a different kind of Aries energy this Aries season, is that maybe this, in some ways, this Aries is really taking from the Pisces season before it, and taking from, and of course Pisces, the moon, fear, facing your fears, you know, like digging deep. We're all doing that right now. That for some of us, if the fire doesn't necessarily come very naturally, but this time of waiting, of not seeing people, of being isolated, what does that make space for potentially? What does that, what does a pause or a break or a rest, sitting in discomfort, which we're all pausing in a lot of discomfort now, like what does that make space for? So I feel like I'm like a little jumbled right now, but there's just so much, like this is really like I'm simmering with this. So I'm curious to know, like, does this resonate with you? How is Aries season feeling for you in this crisis? And maybe like where is, what do you have, if you have stuff in Aries in your own chart, like if you have planets there or points, does that affect in any way like the way you're thinking about Aries right now? So that's all for this video, but we'll have more in the series. And if there's anything in particular in tarot and astrology that you'd like me to address related to COVID-19, let me know. Also, I'm trying to stay out of this like weird blinds, if the image is a little weird, but it's cool. We're all hanging out. We're all a little awkward right now, and it's fine. So don't forget to subscribe to make sure that you get the rest of the videos in this series.